fix your eyes on Jesus. He's the author. He's the finisher of our faith, meaning he is still sovereign. He is still in control. He's still seated on the throne. He still is who he said he is, and he can still do everything that he says that he can do. Nothing that is happening in your personal life or mine, in our culture or yours, nothing that is happening is outside of the control of our great God. But you might forget that if you keep looking at the chaos swirling around you. You've got to be intentional, so do I, about meditating on the truths of God, about looking into them and finding out what are his promises that he declares to be true about my family, about my health, about my son, about my daughter, about my church, about my country, about my culture that I live in. What has he declared to be true? I'm going to meditate on this more than I meditate on everything else. David served the purposes of God in his generation. David kept the main thing. His overarching pursuit was not money. It wasn't success. It wasn't accolades or the applause of people. It wasn't building a brand or building a platform. Those things might have been secondary benefits that came to him. But David's primary pursuit was to serve the purposes of God. You know how you win a victory, my friend? You begin the battle on your knees and you face the battle from a stance of victory. Listen, y'all, we are not fighting for victory. We are fighting from victory. You are already positioned in a place of victory in your life. The task now is to station yourself there. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later. But stationing yourself in a place of victory and then realizing that you're just going to claim what God has already given you. Do you remember when the children of Israel went into the promised land? In Joshua chapter 1, God is confirming his calling of Joshua. He's saying to him, you be strong and courageous when you march into the land. And then he said to him, every place you put your feet, you will have access to. I have already given the promised land to you. The whole of it already belongs to you. But you'll only get to enjoy as much as you put your feet on. Sovereignty is what allows us to know that before time began, that's pre-Genesis 1:1, he already was. In other words, that's the whole reason why there could be a Genesis 1:1, because he already existed so that he could say, let there be, and there was. He has seen not only eternity past, but he's seen the entire spectrum of time, Genesis 1:1, all the way through to the end, Revelation. And he has already been in eternity future. But sovereignty does not just mean that he has seen it all. Sovereignty means he's got the whole thing in the palm of his hand. Which means the span of your life and mine in the context of that entire spectrum, which is just a blip on the radar screen, if he's got the whole thing in the palm of his hands, it means he's got us in the palm of his hand too. Sovereignty, if you believe it, is what allows us to do what Psalm 46:10 says. Cease striving. Chill out. Relax. And know he is God. You serve a God who's got his eyes on you. Nothing that has happened in your life has been lost on God. He knows the investment you've been making. He knows what you've been giving. He knows what you have been sowing into the seeds you've been sowing into that particular area of your life. He knows the discouragement that you feel because you've given so much and have gotten so little back. Even if nobody else knows, your God has got his eyes on you. Now you can't even hear God speak to you because you didn't have a breastplate on. The Apostle Paul says holiness is your breastplate. Holiness blocks you from a full frontal attack of the enemy. Holiness keeps the enemy at bay to where when he comes looking around for some people that he can infiltrate, some upside down environments that he can fester in, he can't find that with me or with you because we've chosen right side up living. Aligning ourselves with the truth of God, breastplates in place, securing us against the schemes of the enemy. Holiness is your breastplate. I came to tell you to live right. I came to tell you not to just have heard all of this, to go home and live in accordance with it. Be ye holy. Not by your power, not by your might, but by the Spirit. If we came to church in the Spirit, it would change our experience in church. Can I just say that? Because while everybody else was looking at that poor couple, wondering why in the world they were in their midst and discounting Mary and Joseph, Simeon came in the Spirit, and he was less concerned about who was wearing what and who was driving up what and who sat where and who was in his seat and whether or not it was hot outside and they had to walk far to go take their children to Sunday school. He was less concerned about his convenience. Whether or not the preacher preached good was irrelevant to him. He was looking for Jesus. Whether or not the microphones were perfectly balanced or the lights were exactly as they should be, whether or not the LD screens were on full display that day, whether or not the ushers were or were not kind was not his priority. He had come with his eyes peeled for Jesus. We would be less critical and less skeptical if we came to church in the Spirit. Then the pressure wouldn't be on the person who's on the stage because you didn't come to see them. You came to see Jesus. Do you understand that in our culture, right now in modern times, sons and daughters need to rise up in the spirit of Elijah with prophetic voices that speak truth even when they're speaking truth to power, that do not back down, that have boldness. Oftentimes, we are looking for great men and women out there somewhere, someone else to be that prophetic voice. But I came to tell you today that it's you. You're the one who's been called in your high school, on your university campus, in your workplace, in your neighborhood, in your circle of friends. You're the sounding board. You're the one that is supposed to be the pinprick of light and hope in the midst of the darkness. So I'm praying that this week God gives you ears to hear what the Spirit is saying, so that you can then be his mouthpiece and declare it to everyone who comes across your path.